Well, then I guess we'll get started. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's nice to see everybody's face. Been too long.
People are three-dimensional.
Huh?
People are three-dimensional.
They are, right? It's just nice to see this thing going away, so. Do we have anybody here that wants to make a public comment before?
There's no Q&A, but you can ask Patty. Patty, do you see any email or Q&A for public comment?
There's nothing.
Very good. Anyone from the board have anything to say before we start? No, good. Now we get on to the next item, and the main purpose of the meeting is the recognition and appreciation of board member Ken Summers' service.
So Mike, if you want to come up here too, to make this free, we have a plaque for Ken. I definitely participate because Ken, you and I share something, or we can just do it right here.
Go right there, Tom. Just do it.
We can just do it right here. Because Ken, you and I share something. This is both of our last meeting.
Oh, man.
So this is the next one. Your first item of business will be to swear in a new fire chief.
Wow.
For all our board members that we've taken your badge, it's on the plaque.
All
I'm
right.
going to give this to Mike to give to you, but thank you for your service. It's been, the last year's been a little hinky with being in the Zoom world and all the COVID stuff. So we appreciate your service and everything you've done for the Poudre Fire Authority.
Well, it's been great working with you, Tom.
Yeah.
You're great.
Appreciate it.
Been a great chief for us for sure.
So this plaque says Ken Summers in appreciation of 2 years of dedicated service as vice chair and board member on the Poudre Fire Authority Board of Directors, May 28, 2019, April 27, 2021. Ken, thank you for your membership and what you provided to us. We'll miss you. We'll miss you very much.
Well, thank you. This is a great group, and it's been an honor to be a part of it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll miss you. Thank you. Always appreciate your thoughtful approaches.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're off to city council too, Ken?
So off city council too. Yeah.
Not yet.
So I've got
Not
like
till tonight. You've got
less than 12 hours.
Wow. Whole new change.
Another 10 hours or so.
10 hours.
I'm still counting days and you're on the
Yeah,
hours.
you're just hours.
Down to hours.
Very good. The next item of business is the Executive Fire Office certification for Matthew J. Housley.
This one I'm going to do. Matt, could you come up here, please? The Executive Fire Officer Program is Matt was you were the last 4-year class, right? Yep. So it's been changed to a 2-year program, but it's still a very intensive executive program for emerging fire officers, for incumbent fire officers, or chief officers, and we have great hope for Matt getting into our battalion chief process. But it's a 4-year process. Each year requires an applied research project. It's been pretty rare at PFA that people have gone through because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun too. You get to go back to Emmitsburg, Maryland. Well, Matt got kind of geeked up with the COVID thing and a couple other things along the way. But Emmitsburg is just 10 miles south of Gettysburg, so you get to learn a lot about Gettysburg and the whole Beltway environment, and also get to see United States Fire Administration at work and stuff, and eat some really good food. Well, at least soft serve.
That's right.
There's a soft serve machine in the cafeteria. But Matt has his applied research project. One of them was working to determine how much hazardous material is going through our jurisdiction. Matt's our hazmat captain, runs our hazmat team. So a lot of that applied research we can apply right back to what we do. So Matt, congratulations. This is a great A lot of work, So it's a great honor to receive this and a great honor to give this to you. So I'm glad I get to be here to do this, man, because I saw you enter the journey and I'm so proud of you for doing it.
Thanks.
So congratulations, buddy. Thank you.
Trying to get one that doesn't also have you right behind yourselves. with the screen, yeah. 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, you guys.
You in the background.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Might be a little awkward to do that.
Yeah, I can stand back up here so you don't have to turn around.
So I guess I'll just say congratulations as well. And thanks for reflecting so positively on Fort Collins. And I'm particularly interested in the work around hazmat passing through Fort Collins, or I guess even for that matter, probably northern Colorado. It's been a topic that we've talked about in our, in the city for a while. I wonder if you could just take, and I'm sorry, don't mean to do this, just put you on the spot, but I wonder if you can.
Now you're a graduate.
I wonder if you can take just a second and, well, first of all, have you shared your report and your work with Jim Byrne, our emergency management director?
Not directly. I mean, Jim and I have talked numerous times, especially as I was going through that. My last paper was actually about integrating emergency management into daily operations, like more at the firefighter and battalion chief level.
Okay.
And so for that, I talked to him quite a bit. We used the report that I wrote about the hazardous material transportation actually in the hazmat portion of accreditation. So it's contained in there as a reference and stuff like that.
And I understand that this can be part of Homeland Security and there's all kinds of things that, we want to be careful about, but I mean, how would you, at a 30,000 foot level, how would you assess sort of this condition for Fort Collins?
I would say we have some legitimate hazards, but I also think that we address the most likely hazards the best. For example, the overwhelming number one hazard that goes through our jurisdiction are petroleum-based products. We don't have a lot of the exotic chemicals and stuff that you might find like along some of the Gulf Coast and some of that kind of stuff. But we changed a little bit of our training process and our PPE and stuff like that to address the stuff that we have. That being said, we do have I-25, which is a significant route for hazardous materials. It's designated as a route for radiologicals, for high explosives, for nuclear material of all different kinds. But we also have a lot of help, right, through the state patrol, through the state, through the feds and stuff like that. I think a lot of that just kind of goes under the radar. I also think it's one of those things we're not going to handle it. No fire department is going to be able to handle it. Definitely OEM is going to be a part of that. Other jurisdictions around us, and we saw that just a couple of weeks ago when we went to Logan to help with their tanker truck that turned over. Right, it's going to be a group effort.
And did you look at trains as well?
Yeah, we did. Trains can be an interesting thing. They're required by law to provide us their routing information if we ask for it under through the LAPC and stuff like that. That doesn't always translate into we have 3 railroads that run through our jurisdiction, and we were able to get information on 2 of them. We're fortunate, like if you think about crude and stuff like that, we don't have a producing area and a processing area in between us or on either end of us, and so we don't have those unit trains like they have in the north or whatever. But we still have a significant hazard there for sure.
Would you please, for the board, say what an LAPC is?
Sure. Sorry, the Local Emergency Planning Committee, which companies are required to provide that information to LAPCs as a result of the Bhopal, India event many years ago. And we have a pretty robust one here in Larimer County. It's managed by the Sheriff's Office. And it's obviously, like most things, been on hiatus with COVID. But in fact, the next meeting has just came out the other day. It's in May, so it'll be starting back up.
And since we're calling you out on acronyms, you might want to say what OEM is too.
Oh, sorry, the Office of Emergency Management, right?
Anything?
It's interesting. We have 5 offices of emergency management in our jurisdiction, right? We have Larimer County, we have Weld County, we have the city of Fort Collins. We have, I won't be able to name them all. We have the CSU.
And Timoth, who's under the county. Timoth.
Yeah, and then so we have a pretty robust operation. It's just interesting to try to get all those folks on the same page, because everybody has just a little bit different way of managing it.
And the unit trains maps, we had those when they were coming on Great Western on the tracks back before they opened up that switching yard in Lafayette. Now we don't see, because that's in my backyard, so we don't see the unit trains of oil anymore.
A lot of that, the higher hazard trains, as they call it, are now routed down like the Highway 85 corridor, less through the city of Fort Collins, which obviously is a significant hazard for us since it runs right through the middle of town, and not only the population hazard, but it separates the town into two, since we don't have an overpass or an underpass.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And thanks for your just commitment to excellence.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it very much.
Matt, while we're questioning you,
Sure.
what about the chlorine coming through town to our water treatment plants? Wastewater and water.
Most of the chlorine right now is coming in 1-ton cylinders, so it's coming by
Oh, it is?
by truck. And a lot of the water treatment plants are starting to transition away from using chlorine, but it's definitely a hazard. But we have, we just did some training for all of our folks back in February where we had all the hazmat techs and we put on all the different A, B, and C kits that are out there that industry provides for managing those type of incidents. We have all the right PPE, all the right monitors. In fact, kind of a shout out, I guess, to the city of Fort Collins. The city of Fort Collins water treatment folks have helped us pay for some of that metering equipment before I was in the program. So it's like most things in hazmat or emergency services, it takes a village to make it work. And I think we're prepared for those kinds of things.
Do we have all the hazmat techs that we need?
We have 42 hazmat techs, which is pretty awesome. Our goal is to have 8 per shift, which allows us to do the highest level of entry, which is considered a level A entry, and manage that within the shift without having to call back any resources. And so that would only be 24 techs if I do my quick math though. So we have almost double that. We have 2 folks down in Pueblo right now that are getting their certification. This is their 2nd week. So we just continue to keep on keeping on. I mean, Chief DeMint is great about supporting training, whether it's like the EFO program or classes like that. And we take advantage of federal funds as much as we can. Those folks that are down in Pueblo, the only thing we had to cover was their time. Their lodging, the class, all that stuff was paid for by a grant, which is fantastic.
It's the same thing when we send people to the fire academy for like executive fire officer, have been signing things for people to do some fire inspection classes. Now that they're getting ready to open it back up, as well as some hazmat classes at the National Fire Academy, we pay for their meals and cover their time. So, and it's fantastic training.
Yeah, I mean, to give it a shout out to Chief DeMint, it's amazing how many of my fellow students, their agency doesn't support them at all. They have to take their own time off. They have to arrange their own coverage and do that. And Chief DeMint has not been that way with this. So training is a big thing. It costs money, and you got to put money in to get people out of it.
We're still based out of Station 10.
Yep. Station 10 is where we have the program and the apparatus and stuff like that. And then the whole idea of having extra techs is to have people spread out across the system. And we've seen that on numerous calls where we've had a hazmat tech that's been on duty in a different engine that's been able to start that process. I mean, just this weekend when my crew was on duty, we worked with the drug task force on a takedown of a house, and we were there for several hours. And that was, it involves that local engine company as well as the hazmat team.
As you can tell, we're in great hands for our hazardous materials. Matt does a fantastic job, and the team he leads it very well. It's very well organized.
So is that
Still
training?
one of the best hazmat teams in the country.
Is that training available to any firefighter who wants to volunteer?
Are you talking about being a hazmat tech?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have one of the folks that's down there right now is from Station 10, and the other one is from a different engine company. So we open it up to the whole
That's
department
really good.
on a regular basis. We can't do it just with Station 10 folks.
It's not easy because it involves chemistry.
That is true.
Yeah, if you don't have it, you don't have it.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very good. We'll move on to item 3 of the discussion items, the review of the Poudre Fire Authority Board Agenda Planning Calendar.
All right. On the planning calendar, you will see, May 11th will be, and we'll talk about that as if we have an agenda item for the annual report. And so May 11th is from conversations I've had with Darren, and that will be a virtual meeting between the 2 parental entities, and we are first on the first on the agenda. Last year we had district board members waiting. So we did get on, we talked to Delaney, got on first on the agenda. And the other thing that where I can take it to where I can take it is Chief Bergston will be sworn in first thing on the May 25th. Because as I've told you before, I'm headed to Salvo, North Carolina, which is just a little bit north of Kitty Hawk on the Outer Banks. We've got, and then I will be back from that to finish up with Derek and do some pass on. I had that on the books already, do the pass on, and we have the change of command ceremony. We'll get out official notices. The change of command ceremony is scheduled for June 11th. 3 p.m. Station 8. We wanted to do it at our training center, but we have a driver operator class going to the place that we had that could house the people outside because we have a lot of concrete out there. Not knowing what will be with COVID and stuff. So that will be my official last day, but we'll hand the reins over to Derek on the beginning of the next meeting. So I will step to the back row. With a smile on my face.
Tom, I want to just say that the May 11th work session you and I have talked about being virtual, it's really up to the next council. We'll have tonight we'll know we know who the mayor is, but we'll know who the mayor pro tem is at that point. The mayor pro tem, city manager, and some others make up the leadership planning team. And I think that leadership planning team is going to determine whether or not we're in-person meetings or whether or not we're virtual. Tonight is an in-person meeting because there's the changing of the guard, if you will. But whether we are all in physically present meetings versus virtual is something that we'll decide in the coming next few days. So there's a possibility that meeting could be in person. So
as an advocate for the district board, I think the district board, and I'll turn to that, I think the district board would appreciate that, to be able to, for a union so that they could see each other. So
now, obviously, all the challenges are going to be still the same. I mean, do we do it in a COVID acceptable kind of way?
Right.
And then also, if we are in person, I have no doubt that people would be able to participate virtually too, if that's what they chose. So district board members. So anyway, maybe you and I can talk.
Sure.
Later this week.
Okay. Awesome. So anything past that on the calendar, I'm going to look at Ann.
Because what did you say, Mike?
So is tonight you also appoint new members to the PFA board? No,
May 7th and 8th.
May 7th and 8th, okay.
The next board meeting is, what did you say, May 25th? May 25. So we need to make sure that we have our PFA board appointment before that. Okay.
Is there any other changes on the calendar that anybody would like to make, or any questions about it? Okay. Very good. We'll move on to consent agenda. We got the March 23rd PFA Authority Board meetings, appropriation of insurance recovery revenue, and appropriation of station alerting funds. Tom, is there anything you'd like to bring to the attention of the board before we act on that?
No, I think that this is all in accordance with things that we've been chugging along on, getting their insurance money back for some hail damage and stuff. And I just put a plug in Captain Hettinger, who we've moved into that facilities maintenance role, and facilities construction is just doing a bang up job and saving us lots of money, being on top of those things. So that ties into the insurance recovery, and the station alerting funds is catching up and making sure that the stations, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill Kirsten, is making sure that the stations are up to date on being notified from dispatch of a call and having the latest technology to make that work. Yeah, it turns on the lights, and when the call comes in, we haven't been in the station. Now we're getting through COVID stuff and get, people back out doing ride-alongs. The lights come on, there's tones, it interrupts the station. So, we gotta go. Even in the middle of the night, the lights come on. But they're red, so they don't blind you.
We had over $128,000 worth of damage on various fire stations throughout.
Yeah, we have some stations that seem to be in Hale Alley. We've had some vehicles and some stations damaged, but through the work of Captain Henniger, and fortunately we have a firefighter who on his off days has a roofing business, and we're not using him as our roofing business, but he's been on modified duty, and we have used his knowledge of the roofing business and the insurance industry to save us money. That's really good work with Captain Henniger.
So do we have a deductible on that? Our insurance?
Yeah, it's $25,000 on a hailstorm. The storm gets rolled together between the vehicles and the building, but it doesn't take much on a fire engine or a
It sure doesn't.
pickup truck or whatever. And a roof, of course. They're big roofs.
Well, pretty good investment for $25,000. We get $100,000 coverage.
Well, we pay a lot more than that, though.
Yeah, I know we do.
But we're pretty pleased with the insurance carrier that we're using and the broker that we use that helps us make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck on our insurance dollars.
What happened on the accidents, the Ram and a fire truck?
They were accidents, I believe, and there are other staff on that can probably answer better, but I believe that somebody ran into them. They weren't caused by PFA, they were other vehicles.
The Ram I'm aware of, and I can turn to Chief Jones up in Zoomland. The Ram was sitting right here where they stage because they use this facility when they're not on calls, and one of the construction vehicles for elevations, one of the forklifts, the driver was blinded and caught the corner of it with the fork. The fire engine. Chief Jones, are you there?
I am, and I'm trying to remember what happened with engine 5. I apologize. I don't have that off the top of my head.
It wasn't it's my knowledge, Chief, it wasn't a traffic accident, was it? Was it
I believe that's correct. I believe a citizen hit the rig.
backed into it? In that case. Those things happen.
Okay, thanks.
I won't say frequently, it's not an everyday thing, but back ends and those things. If there's a major traffic accident, you will be one of the first group of people to know if we've got somebody.
So the poor ambulance got into a pretty serious wreck.
They had 2 in 2 weeks, and it was right after Chief McLean went to work there.
Was
I
it?
don't know if there's any relationship to that or.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda number 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item on the agenda, we'll go to staff reports. Tom, I'm going to read this from you.
The first one is the legislative report, and it's an extended session, so there's still some bills being introduced. It will begin to wind down. Following bills that we believe are most appropriate for PFA to follow. We had a discussion yesterday. We don't necessarily follow in suit with Colorado State Fire Chiefs is recommending on some of this legislation. We see it as there's some positions we take as the authority. But to go through them real quick, especially on House Bill 1008, that is on its way to past third reading, so it's on its way to the governors to be signed, and that was supported, authored, and initiated by our mayor. Well, not our mayor yet. As of 6 o'clock tonight, our mayor, but Representative Arndt brought that forward, and this allows dissimilar organizations or even within an organization to initiate bonds or to go to the voters to ask for money. So a fire district could get together with a water district, or water districts could get together to do wildfire mitigation. And the state chiefs supported that after some work with some of the western side of the state. Some of the fire chiefs were worried that that gets competitive for tax dollars, but that's on its way to the governor, and we're pretty pleased with that. The mental health grant program, along with the behavioral health transportation, they kind of are married together. Both of those are in appropriations right now to get funding. They do have fiscal notes attached, which is usually a pretty good sign for legislation getting the appropriate interest to pass. The first responder interaction with persons with disabilities has been assigned to health and human services. We're still in the monitoring position for that. The chemical restraints on persons, that's a new item in the legislative thing. Colorado State Fire Chiefs has taken a strongly opposed. And there's just do a little explaining why that is. From the cusp, it looks like great legislation in the fact that it legislatively prevents a police officer from telling a paramedic to administer a chemical restraint, such as ketamine, Versed. There are other medications that can be used as chemical restraint. You hear a lot about ketamine after the incident in Aurora. Ketamine is actually, its classification of drug is it's a hallucinogenic anesthetic. That it's very similar to LSD in its structure chemically, but it can be used. One of the indications is it's a chemical restraint. And there's a specific dose that's given by weight. So this legislation says you must weigh the patient. We have no means of weighing a patient in the field. So we have some opposition in that, but it should be given by, there are a sundry of cardiac medications that are also to be given by weight. And if you don't get your dosage right and estimate the weight right, you can have an untoward effect. The problem that the medical community has with this is medical control. Medical control lies, in our case, with Dr. Tremblay, our medical director. And so what the medical community is like, we don't want the legislature interfering in our relationships with our paramedics. Having been a paramedic back in the days of horses and buggies, is how we got the calls. But having been a paramedic in those days, they're the only person that could tell you to give or not to give medication. And that was ingrained in you through your training, was your medical direction in the ER, where you would give the estimated weight of the patient and have that interchange with the doctor. So that's what the Colorado State Fire Chiefs is arguing. And now the bill has been amended once again in a legislative call last week, that if a police officer is on scene, you're unable to give ketamine. If they're just on scene. And what they're trying to prevent is a police officer saying, "Know that person." And it's a medical decision and snow is a probably vernacular that's not appropriate for a board meeting, but to restrain that person chemically. And it's in the case of using chemical mediators to do that, it's not a law enforcement decision. It's a safety decision for the patient if they're experiencing a condition called excited delirium. So we are, since as PFA at this point, we don't carry ketamine in any of our units. We still have yet to deploy our advanced life support people, so that's why we're recommending and monitor. UC Health is involved very much in the legislation. We're recommending that we monitor this legislation and follow it from that point, rather than, since we aren't engaged in that treatment right now, it's about our dog in the hunt. So that's a new one, and that one is pretty controversial down in Denver right now. The next bill is the inmates with fire service experience working on the prison crew hand crews. That has been signed by the governor, and that means that those who out of Canyon City, I can't remember the name of the wildfire fighting hand crew that comes out of Canyon City, but they helped us during the Crystal Fire. They helped us during the Picnic Rock Fire, because those were out of season fires. There weren't a lot of hand crews stood up, and we saw those crews. They were working on our fires. They deploy all around the state, And so what this legislation does is it enables those people to be able to apply for a job with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. It does not mandate us to hire those people or to consider those people. It gives them an opportunity with the DFPC to continue their work as firefighters in the wildfire. The transfers for wildfire mitigation response has gone to the governor and has been signed. There's a picture of the helicopter that the state will be getting. It's a Firehawk. Dave knows about that quite a bit because he has a grandson that works for Firehawk here in Colorado. It's a California and Colorado-based company, but they take Black Hawk helicopters and convert them for firefighting. The state bought its first. I would guess there would be more, but it's about a $40 million lift between the lease that they have to pay this year, because they're going to lease one this summer, and then they'll have another one in the air, or they'll own the one in the air by summer of 22. To put that in comparison, LA County has about 10 or 12 of those just in LA County. But it carries a lot of water. It can carry a lot of firefighting, carry a lot of firefighters to rappel into an area to fight fire. So it should help us with the initial attack in the state. It will be deployed depending on severity, meaning where the drought is and where the fire indexes or fire indices are the greatest potential for major fires. The nurse intake is going to appropriations, and that's something we've talked about at this board for several years now. We did when Chief Waters was here, and this has had some tweaks to help it get through and define how that grant money will be delivered. But it looks like this is probably going to pass, and we are very much in support of that. We put a nurse in the 9/11 center, and so our low acuity calls, we can send the right response. When we get more and more co-responders to some of this other legislation is helping us create, rather than sending, big white trucks and ambulances and stuff, we might see the day that we're sending more people out in a minivan or one of those Chevy Bolts to go take care of these people and get them to the right facility for their treatment. So that's looks like it's going to go through. We're still in the support position with that. The Colorado Fire Commission recommendations, we're supporting that. That is one of the big things that comes out of that is mutual aid. And we've been working on a statewide mutual aid program since I've been fire chief, so it's been 10 years. Finally, I think we've come to some resolution that it has some funding back that would go into the Division of Fire Prevention and Control to have people who would monitor when we get into start getting into the environment of the summertime, to get the right mutual aid resources. Because we have a wildfire on the western boundaries of PFA. We don't need a hazmat team to come. We need wildfires. So at first they wanted fire chiefs that were on their days off on the weekends, that the DFPC would handle it during the week, and then fire chiefs would handle it on the weekends. And I'm like, man, if I was going to be on call for that, I'd have my on-call sheet laminated under a seat somewhere, and probably forget that I was on call. It needs a better structured system, and this helps provide that. The rural electric wildfire bill it's been postponed indefinitely, so I don't think we're going to see that one anymore. But I think that impetus is there to pursue that. And then at Ken brought this up at our last meeting, is the Workers' Rights Act. And right now we are taking as PFA an opposed position. I think that's where the city's at on that as well, Darren. And Colorado State Fire Chiefs, it's not really emerged on their radar yet. It is big time on the radar of CML and special districts. And we've been working with special districts on their opposition to that. And that's one of those cases where Ann Terry and Kevin Balmer work very closely together to it puts us into some high risk things, as Ken pointed out last time, such as contractors that work for us or volunteers that work for those contractors. Anybody that touches us, we gain some responsibility for how they treat their employees. So there's some risk to the organization. The argument from CML and our argument is that we have those things in place for discrimination, harassment, and those things in our rules and regulations, our collective bargaining agreement, and our policies. So that's it in a nutshell for the legislature that we believe is impacting us right now. So
On the REA bill. Did we consult with REA, or do you have any idea where Poudre Valley REA stands on that?
No, I don't have, having not been down there with COVID and in that role, I just know that it was not ready for prime time, is what I got. I think you'll probably see another iteration come back. If you remember, it was to try to, well, it gave them the right to mitigate around their power lines on private property. So once you get into private property issues, it gets a little gooey
Sure.
in the committee meetings and on the floor.
It sounds like such a good idea to be able to do that. I mean,
It
you
also
see 'em-
requires them to do it too. So
Oh,
you
okay,
got both sides that are a little bit chippy with it. It's going to take a
Yeah.
while for them to craft something that
okay.
will work. And they're trying to be, the intent is trying to be ahead of what's happening in California when they have these wind events and the lines start banging into
Yeah.
each other. Yeah. So that was the intent.
You see them mitigating all over the place. I mean, they do a lot of that.
So in my experience at Crystal Lakes, they basically do what, they have an
It's part of
easement
it.
now
Yeah,
and they use their easement, but there's some things that they need to do even outside the easement. So
okay. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Move on to, is there any questions regarding? Next item
Another
is a
last
full
one.
point overview.
Link.
What?
Oh, I just said another last legislative update.
Yeah,
So Pulse Point, you ready for that? You bet. Chief Jones is in those speakers right above your heads. And this gives me a chance to point out, since you've been here, the last meeting, there's been some changes to the room. Well, you guys were in here for the hiring of the new fire chief, but we've added the new big screen TVs, which are easier to see, and we don't have to have those loud projectors. And we've got this, the people are hearing us as good as they do when we're in our Zoom meeting, because above you can see the little red lights around those microphones, and that's picking us up. So it's, if you remember, we went through how do we broadcast these meetings and stuff. That's helping it dial in with the cameras that are on there. You're able to see the boardroom. So Chief Jones is upstairs, but he's going to come to us via the machinery here to give us a report on Pulse Point. Board member Atterbury asked us last time to do an update, and so I'm going to turn it over to Chief Jones to do an update on where we're at with Pulse Point. You have a sticker to put on your vehicle or your front door.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for your time. Just kind of a little backstory here as we go through some changes within our EMS division, which is where Pulse Point has resided. That's why I'm stepping up, because a lot of the information that was generated for today's report was done by our IT analyst, Mark Regan, who created the information in your packet. So I'm just going to give you a quick high-level flyover of what Pulse Point is and what it's been doing for the community. And then certainly I'll stay on and answer any questions that I can for you. So what is Pulse Point? It's basically a phone app that can be used both with Android and Apple devices. And what it does is its primary function for the community is to alert community members or subscribers that have this app on their phone when there is a cardiac arrest in the community. But more specifically, it alerts people who are signed up within a quarter-mile radius of that event, and will send that information. It'll also, if there's an AD, it will send the mapping for where the closest AED is to that patient. And then we have the ability for users to indicate that they are CPR trained. And so that's really the big scope of this project, is that it allows people who have the skills outside of just us as first responders to potentially get in there and make a difference. So by the end of last month, we were over 13,000 subscribers and over 5,000 people that are registered as CPR providers. So if you think about that community-wide, that's expanding our abilities and services as a community greatly, even over what we can do as an emergency services provider. Some of the other things that it can do, it is a tool that we both our folks use and then the community at large can kind of listen in. They can see what calls were going on day to day. They can listen to certain radio channels that are provided through the app. Obviously, our encrypted channels are not available to them, and we don't also send personal information that would be HIPAA related out over the airwaves or through the script within the app. Let's see, some of the things that do, one of the things that we're moving towards is something called verified responder. So currently, everything that I just told you is only applicable in public spaces. So if the cardiac event happens downtown or wherever, that's where this kicks in. If it's in somebody's residence, these alerts do not go out because we don't want the public responding to somebody's home saying, hey, I'm here to help. Obviously, those people in need would not necessarily know who this other person is. But what we are doing, the next level, is something that's called verified responder. This is something that we've now also enabled with the app, which allows these notifications. If it happens in a residence, those that are verified responders can get these notifications. Again, same parameters, quarter mile, notify the AED. But that way, some of our folks, Chief Dement has a great story about, if this happens in a residence or something public just across the street, we as providers, and if we're in that verified responder system, we'll get notification and we can take action. So all this is really good stuff. Let's see, what else am I missing there, Chief?
I will go over this part, Sean.
Say that again.
I will go over, can you see the?
Absolutely. So the graphic, the spreadsheet that you have there, again, we've got out of our 13,000 people, over 13, about 13,300 people signed up, over 5,000 again are followers that will get the CPR alerts enabled. Of the sudden cardiac arrests that have been put out, we average a total of those of probably about 20 per month, but that number goes down significantly when you talk about public versus private residences. So much fewer of those are in a public location, but still the information is out there in the community. And the rest of the stuff on that spreadsheet, the numbers look high, but basically what that's saying is that the number of people that receive those notifications. So when you're looking at structure fire notifications, vegetation fire, that's the people who have chosen to receive that information through the app, so that they're kind of keeping an eye on what's going on in the community from an emergency response perspective, and who's hearing that information.
You can see the delta between the number of followers and the number of followers with CPR alerts enabled. That's a space where we want to work to get more CPR people signed up that are following to know what calls are going on. So we want to make that, to narrow that gap, to get more of those people to sign up to be CPR providers. That's part of our public outreach with that.
I do have a couple of questions, so thank you. Is that okay? Mike? I'm
Absolutely.
sorry, I
Absolutely.
just assumed because you looked at me, the presentation was over. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Right, John?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So Sean, thank you, Chief and Sean, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I'll just say, I don't know, ironically, I remember Chief Dement talking about Pulse Point in his interview process for becoming the chief. I remember hearing about Pulse Point in a conversation, in a meeting I was in Northern California, and coming back and the chief used this software actually in one of your answers to a community conversation at the Lincoln Center. And so we've been sort of on this for a long time. And I for me, it's just sort of an update to the community really also about this app, the significance of it, it's complicated or not complicated, it's complex and comprehensive, but it's very, very easy to use. And so, part of the reason for asking was I wanted some of the data that Sean's already shared. So you've answered the questions I have. So thank you for that. My maybe question would be, how does the city of Fort Collins and how does PFA continue to promote this in the community if we have 11,000, almost 12,000 followers, then, how do we get to 22,000? And how do we get to 50,000? I'm sure there's a heck of a lot more phones than 12,000 phones in this community. But I'm sitting here thinking, Tom and Sean, how does the city help with our social media, with our outreach efforts to get this out? And then also just again, more information, how people become CPR certified. And then we did this last time, and I think it's been over 2 years, but I might say, as a board, and as we have a new board, at least one new board member, how do we go through CPR training again as a board, and to model that, we're up to speed on our training and sort of modeling that behavior. So thank you for the update. I love it. I've always been a big fan of Pulse Point. I want to offer, however, the city can help with our communications office, Sean, and our Office of Emergency Management. How can we kind of do a community outreach effort? And then, and both for Pulse Point and CPR certified, and then maybe get on the board's calendar to do the CPR training like we did a few years ago.
Great idea. Great.
If I could address that, we've got 2 positions in community risk reduction, fire prevention, that we were working on filling for outreach, public educators, and Chief Bergman spoke with Chief Howell and say, can we hold off till I can come and meet with you and develop that? So we'll pass that on to Chief Bergson and Chief Howell as well, because that's part of that outreach where that comes from, as well as you know, Chief Waters went on to UC Health, and Captain Salazar now has taken the same, has announced his departure to go to UC Health as well. So there's some vacancies in EMS, and that's where EMS and CRR meet, is in that Pulse Point space. We've had Pulse Point, and we don't have that position right now, but in the past we've had a Pulse Point ambassador, if you will. But I think there's a lot of opportunities as we move in the future and reshape those positions and reshape EMS. I think community CPR is, personally, I think that's huge, and we can teach it so easy now. When I started in this business many years ago, it took 2 days to get certified to be a CPR provider, not a CPR instructor. It took 2 days. And now we can do it. We can teach you in 45 minutes at a high level. We can teach you in 5 minutes how to do it. Our dispatchers are doing it, which is a little sidebar. We're looking at counting that as part of our response time, because their dispatchers are teaching people how to do CPR over the phone when someone's in cardiac arrest. And we've had them right here that have saved lives through that. So it all is connected together.
Can I jump in really quick too? We did last year get $1,000 grant from Pulse Point for marketing. And because of change in personnel and different things, it lapsed at year end. So that's one thing. Once we get a position or a person in that position again, that will be coming back for reappropriation. But we tried to give the money back to Pulse Point, and they talked us out of it. And they have a great contact person with all kinds of marketing ideas and suggestions. So it's there, and it will be coming back before you for reappropriation once we get that person scheduled.
Chief, if you mind if I just weigh in one more time? Darren, I think to your point too, I think we're actually primed, and to add on to what Chief DeMint was just sharing. Not only are we doing it in our community, Loveland is also on Pulse Point. Our PIO, Annie Bierbauer, often uses the information from Pulse Point in kind of our information log out on social media. And then with this verified responder, I think we're right on the cusp actually of taking it to the next level. So I'll be excited to see what we do over the next 12 months with this. I do think we're moving in a good direction.
Great job, Tom. Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be the 2020 annual report with preview.
All right. So we are scheduled on May 11th, and Darren and I will come up with what that plan will be of how we will make this presentation for our annual report. And Ann let me know yesterday that we've been bringing the two boards together for 7 years now. I thought it was for like 2. So time flies when you're having fun. But bringing two boards together to do the annual report because we are required to do so by the IGA. And so this is a preview of what we will be reporting to the joint meeting coming up in May. Before I start, I want to thank Kirsten Howard for all her work. She's one who puts this together. She worked with PFA, she worked with Sean in the planning analysis area of our department, working with our GIS analyst and our data analyst, working with our GIS analyst, Paula Robinson, and our data analyst, Haley Spurrier. Chief Jones has had input. The CRR with Chief Howell and Chief Sims had a lot of input. So if you remember, and we still will have available that thick document that gets down into the nitty gritty of the data. But what we want to do is give this in a nutshell, something that in a moment in time, you can grab a brochure that will be available by May 11th on the card stock that gives that data. And by the way, on the back of that is a pulse point data. We're getting that out getting that out to the community is just Kirsten's work has been phenomenal, and this just gets better every year in our reporting. So,
And I also add Annie Bierbauer was
thank
highly
you.
involved in this. So
Annie Bierbauer and her talents is reaching out to the public and a lot of the photos and stuff have been added to that. So it's a group effort, and it really lets the public know what PFA is doing. So if we hit the next slide, Kirsten. So with the joint meeting, introductions of our plan is to introduce everybody. We'll have a new council seated, and like I say, since the last time we were together, Corey Uni is new to the board. So, and I think maybe even Tess is new to the board since the last time we were physically together. So, but most people over the city know Tess already, but it would be a great way to introduce everybody, even in that virtual environment. Next slide, please. So the annual report is we affectionately refer to the two as the parents. The district and the city are the parents of the authority. The authority we can raise some fees. There's some fees we can use in fire prevention and some of those permit fees and such, but otherwise we have no way to make money. Our parents are where the money comes from for Poudre Fire Authority. So through that intergovernmental agreement that's created, and the two together create the authority, and that's this annual report required by IGA. One of the things I have to point out, and I've pointed it out ad nauseum over the years, this is our 40th. Next slide, Kirsten. I think that shows that this is our birthday year. So happy birthday, PFA board. You're 40 years old now. So now it's time to start behaving like that. But in those 40 years, that our best knowledge, and we've gone back and researched, and I can tell you for sure in the last 10 years, there's never been a vote that's been split between the two parents. We've had split votes. We've had people vote opposite of each other, not real common, but we've had that happen. But it's never been the district voting against the city. And I think that is really an example of Northern Colorado and the collaboration we experience. There are communities up against each other, there are issues, but we always come to provide what's best for our citizens. And I think that's really reflected in this model. And it's been very successful for 40 years. You can see what we refer to as the donut that one didn't hit my color spectrum so I can see it. Usually you put up a map and go, where's the line? Because the colors just meld together. But with this there, I can see the different colors, and you can see how the district surrounds the city. And that's what started this thing back in 1978 when Chief Mulligan got together with Chief Willis, and they just started talking about response, going, man, we need to send the closest piece of apparatus. Because a district engine would come from Link Lane, and it would go all the way across the city to go out of the Foothills campus area because that was in the district. And it would pass by 2 city stations. Well, that wasn't making much sense. So as we're doing now, they start working to send the closest unit. And we're doing that with some of our neighbors now. Then it became governance. came after that. There were, we could get, as the slide shows here, is, the duplication of equipment, services, overhead costs. We could start finding economies of scale of that. You could get 2 fire chiefs for the price of 1. You could get 2 HRs for the price of 1. There's all these things that created advantages, and it opened up this governance that we have here to look at the authority as a whole. Where we place a fire station, when we look at a Montava, or we look at Timna's Grove, we can put a fire station regardless of where those geopolitical boundaries are to best serve the community as a whole. And that's really worked out well in those 40 years. And the boundaries are frequently changing with annexations and stuff. So it provided that flexibility for this model. So next slide. It's resulted in results, and that's we are outcome driven. Because that's what Mrs. Smith calls for. She calls for an outcome. She calls for fire to go out. She calls for someone to take care of her medical emergency. She may call because the cat's stuck in the tree, whatever. She's wanting an outcome. And we record those outcomes, and we look back at 2020 as an example of the effectiveness that we've created with this 40-year model. Our cardiac save rates are still up 600%. We are still, even through COVID, we had some reports say 18, some say 20. I like to go with the 20, but more verified as 18. 18 lives were saved when people walked out of the hospital that were in cardiac arrest. Our save rate is very high, and a part of that is Pulse Point, part of it is community. That dispatchers that are responding to call, they are the first responders. When someone calls and says, my husband is not breathing, let's do something about that. They're on the phone doing that. So it's a system as a whole that we work with to do that. We intercede before flashover almost 96.5% of the time. That means that we can find the fire in the room of origin. Just a week and a half ago, almost a week ago Sunday, the apartment complex across the street from Station 8 had a fire on a balcony. And before we arrived on scene, when we got called, there was water on the fire because we got called by the sprinkler system sounding the alarm. The fire sprinkler system put the fire out, and it was a very small fire. To my knowledge, people didn't even have to leave their apartment. They were able to sleep there that night. The damage was on the outside where the fire was suppressed by. So we're counting that in our data collection as suppressing fire. Plus, we have, I can't say enough about our workforce and their ability to adapt to what we're learning in fighting fire. There's worldwide research. We've participated in that on how we attack fires, and our crews have adopted and adapted to that, and we are suppressing fire. That's also a reflection of our training, the results of our training, and how effective we are in the fire ground when a building's not sprinkled. We're able to suppress those fires before they get big.
Tom, that's an amazing statistic.
I think it is.
I mean, it is to me. I mean, when you get down to less than 4% of the fires that are started experience flash, I mean, I don't know numerically what that looks like. That's got to be actually a very small, small number. I mean, and those are the ones, of course, that get most of the news coverage is when the whole house is in flames or something like that. But when you look at that percentage, that's a great, that's a great data point. My goodness. So good job on that. Like I say, for all the reasons you mentioned, but it's one of those things where you just kind of, it's worthy to pause and say, 96%, that's,
What's our
that's more than, yeah.
What's our history been on that?
It's hard to say, Dave, because just in the last, and I can't, Sims could tell us probably how many years we've added the fire prevention aspect to that. Our benchmark used to be 85% because we were just measuring the response side. But, there are people who walk through that door probably during this meeting with a ream of plans under their hand, and somebody over there is going to say, you got to put a sprinkler system in. We're causing that to happen. And when those sprinkler systems work, that gets reflected there. The other part is our public education and the fire alarm systems we put in, because the fire alarm system goes off early on in the fire. We get there and it's just a trash can smoldering at that point. And we're able to take action to mitigate that. And that is a fire that would have happened. So we're capturing that data to show our overall success. It doesn't mean the fires still don't happen.
Right.
And, we were always just that far away. I was explaining to one of our newer staff the other day, so we haven't had a real colossal fire in some time. What's a colossal fire? I said, well, Penny Flats was one. The Equine Center, Insemination Center, which we had, that was the same year as Penny Flats. Both of those were $12 million losses.
Yeah.
So we still have that potential, but when we have aerials, you all purchased an aerial that will be here in June. And that was it's $1 million lift, and Darren has asked before, man, we really got to spend $1 million for one of those. And when you've got to have them, when you got to have them. So those things are still hanging on the precipice. But man, if we can keep it impacting it's a total fire protection system that we provide as the Poudre Fire Authority. It's not just the response side. It's not just fire prevention. It's all of it working together to reach that number.
And with construction changes, building codes, sprinkler systems, response time. In the history of Fort Collins, the state dry goods fire is going to be, pretty much just a marker in history past. I don't see anything like that. Hopefully, happening again. Not that it couldn't, but the chances are now.
I hope that fire is etched in the hearts of 230 people who work here, because that was a line of duty death of our fire chief.
Right.
When we lost Chief Carpenter on that fire. That is something for us to remember. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why we are considered a pain to some people who want to build a building because it's got to have this, got to have this, got to have this. Because that's what we want to create. And there's a slide coming up, and I'll show you some of the results that impact the costs of what we provide that it connects to that.
Was there one other thing that we put into place? I forgot what you call it. Instead of getting the big hole, we put a little tiny hole in there and then put the mist in the attic.
It's a fog nail, but what we've
nail,
done as I've told you before, we've sent people to Europe to train with some of the best experts. We've sent people around the country to train with UL, National Institute of Standards and Testing, on research they're doing, because fire is driven by physics. And I have a saying, physics are laws, they're not just good ideas. And so we're learning more and more about that physical environment that we thought was true. Well, wow, we've really never applied scientific research. So we will hit a fire from the outside. When I came on the fire department, it was a sin to squirt water in through a window at a fire, because you're going to push fire throughout the rest of the building. Now it's real commonplace. We've tried to replicate what we thought would happen.
Yes.
And so there's still times we may have to cut a hole, but it's so rare now because we don't want to create flow path, because the flow path, the fire is going to follow. So the research that we've learned and we train with has really helped immensely. And then, so to move along, our budget, we protect $41.5 billion worth of property. Corey Unies, who was a realtor sitting next to me yesterday, said, that with the price, the values of property going, it's almost like that national debt sign that's got the little number going like that. That's the price of property right now. So that's probably gone up since we started the meeting. Just joking, but and then the budget to actual, we try to be at a 1% underspend because of COVID. If you remember, a year ago we were clamping down on things, and thanks to our IGA and the partnership with the city, we did not take a hit. The city did, so we stood a lot of that stuff that we froze back up. We've got Station 6 underway. Station 7 it's underway as far as the planning process. Will probably break ground in about a year. So our underspend, and the thing that we've changed over the last 10 years, kind of closing out a career on that statement, is we used to do a year-end spending spree. We don't do that now. We take that underspend and put it in our reserves. So when the next global pandemic or the next crisis hit, we're in a position to say, we've got reserves to get us through this time. We were accredited again in 2020, which very proud of that by the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. And as Chief Jones said, that becomes that commonplace vernacular that these things were driven by, and as Matt Housley, Captain Housley said, this is part of our accreditation process. That's how we improve to get those numbers. And then the other thing was some old guy said he's going to go do other things. And so the pandemic was, like I said, we clamped down. We clamped down in the fire stations. Our firefighters have persevered through that, wearing masks 48 hours a day. We were getting close to being able to let them have their mask off if everyone in that station is vaccinated. We're working closely with Local 1945 on what that policy will look like. And we also have been working with, I had a great conversation yesterday with Tom Gonzalez, our public health director for that. We've recovered funds from the feds for our response to COVID. So COVID was one of the big things that hit us in 2020. The next thing though that hit us was the Cameron Peak fire.
Hey, Tom, real quick on
Yeah.
the COVID thing. How many positive COVID cases do we have in our firehouses?
Chief Vanderbilt, are you out there? And I think he has the count. He is our
It's 11,
incident commander for our
I saw a
COVID response.
report.
Like
It's
around
over
11?
11.
11 is right.
I thought it was 13. What's our count on throughout for the last 14 months, 15 months?
We're at 12 now.
I mean, any of those, what was the range in
Yeah,
terms
just
of severity of?
We had no hospitalizations, correct?
Correct.
Hospitalizations, we had some people that had some pretty substantial symptoms, but we had no hospitalizations and no deaths. I might note with that, at Laramie Fire District number 2, which is in Cheyenne, one of the rural departments in Cheyenne, they experienced a line of duty death from one of their assistant chiefs that was on a fire and steamboat. He contracted COVID in the fire camp, and that was in August or September, and was put in the hospital in Salt Lake City. He just was returned home last week and passed away on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Any other things, anything to add on that, Chief?
Nothing for me if there's any questions. It just, again, we're continuously looking at all of our procedures and changing when needed, trying to follow CDC, CDPHE, Larimer County, and just keeping up with it all. So everybody's doing a fantastic job. Can't say enough about them.
Yeah, and that's 12 out of, what I have,
190 uniforms, but 230 total employees, thereabouts. So, and comparing that, now you're familiar with West Metro, of course, coming from Lakewood. West Metro has over 400 firefighters, and but they have experienced, Chief, over 100 cases.
But that was the last report, and that was about a month ago. So probably about a quarter of their people have experienced COVID.
So we've done a fantastic
No,
job.
we have, and when you consider the firefighter station environment, so forth like that, I think that's
Bless their hearts, they've
Yeah,
done done a fantastic job out there.
that's a good job. So Chief Vandy, good job on that, and others who've been involved in that area.
And Chief Vanderbilt, like I said, has been our incident commander from when we stood up the incident command team. Has done a fantastic job. I mean, again, that shows in our results of the number of people who've contracted the disease, and it hasn't been comfortable. It hasn't been fun, but we have persevered and got there. So
Yeah.
thank you, Chief.
Thanks, everybody. Really as good as the people around you, so I appreciate everybody.
So we go to the next slide of the Cameron Peak fire, which we all knew about, with the black cloud that hung over our community.
Yeah.
For literally for 2 months. I think that the picture in the upper left of Captain Ryan Thomas standing there looking out over that valley, that just, I mean, the singleness of, and just the overwhelmingness of that fire was great. We were involved in, PFA was involved last summer. We had the 3 largest wildfires in the history of Colorado. We had responders that we were had sent to Grand Junction for that fire. And of course, we participated in Cameron Peak because we lost, I believe, 4 homes in PFA's jurisdiction in the district jurisdiction, Redstone Canyon. And then, of course, we helped with when the fire came over the Continental Divide, and there were many of us in the fire service said, well, fire's not going to jump the Continental Divide in Rocky Mountain National Park. Well, it sure did. And made a run at Estes Park. So we're from both of those incidents, we, because of federal declarations and the way we work with the state and federal governments, we were receiving pretty significant cost recovery for those incidents. So we are, and the bad news is all the weather forecasts are more of the same this summer. High pressure coming in through the southwest, really the global aspect of this high pressure and the El Nino La Nina effect is predicting another hot and dry summer. So we anticipate this could be another summer of wildfire. We go next. The financial impact of COVID-19 we've talked about. We clamped down, we've got reimbursement going, and we've got reimbursement coming from Cameron Peak. I'm real appreciative of the work that this board has done and the push to really focus on building those reserves over the last 10 years. Because although it's scary going into COVID, we didn't know what would happen and looking into our crystal balls, but we knew we had reserves to fall on. So maintaining that's good. And then the ball on the right shows the allocation formula works between the district property tax, the city's property tax, KFCG, and the sales tax revenues. And still go to the next slide. Well, it'll be the slide after this, but it's still staying around that 80-20 split, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So the issues that we dealt with, pandemic and wildfire response together, was tough. There was people in fire camps that had COVID in them, and so we got through those pretty well. We dealt with the financial uncertainty. We didn't know what was happening with sales and use taxes. Kudos back to the city for their work before this to gather sales tax from some of those online vendors, because as soon as we couldn't go to the store, most people in the community have a personal relationship with the guy in the Amazon Prime van or the FedEx truck or whatever. And fortunately, we were able to capture some of that revenue. And fee revenues, with the growth that we were experiencing, property taxes were, as Dave said yesterday, it's the good news, bad news. The bad news is, as an individual, your property taxes are going up. Good news is, as an entity that is dependent upon that to be able to grow along with the community, we'll have revenue coming in. So we go to the next slide. What we did to save money, we put on a hiring freeze. We shut down capital projects, which have been opened back up. I can't wait to bring the board out to our training center to see the new kitchen that we were able to build. One of our firefighters, and I can say I got 26 days left, but one of our firefighters says, this looks like a cafeteria at Google. So, but it was through Chief Garcia and the folks out there, man, we need a place to be able to feed a group of firefighters that are out there training at one time. So it has a bank of microwaves. It has a big commercial refrigerator, and instead of tables, it has a counter that they can set up. So it's done, it was done with great responsibility as far as the funding of it, but it really created a great space. We got engine 7 replaced with basically a refurb. That's what a glider, probably the best way to explain that is. And, but we got that going again, but we shut that down initially. We shut down our purchase orders. We had a great deputy assistant chief plan that we were going to bring to you in the summer, but COVID kind of brought that down, and we'll turn that what the senior leadership team will look like over to Chief Bergston. We changed how we put a hold on ordering staff vehicles, and it's a briefing paper in your packet. We've changed how we do that. We're going to save money and drive a newer fleet, which is pretty cool all at once. We shut down conferences and training. Those are starting to open back up now. We did save some money through fuel because the price of fuel went down, and saved some other non-personnel stuff. So that's looking backwards into 2020, what we did. So next slide. In 2020, we had no civilian or firefighter related deaths. In 21, we've had 3. And as far as we know at this point in investigations, we're not sure on the third one yet for sure, but it appears that all 3 of those were intimate with ignition, meaning they were at the point of the origin of the fire, which makes it virtually impossible to be able to stop that event. And we are still, we've always been right around 0.85. We're 0.86 uniformed personnel per 1,000 population, which is the lowest amongst the benchmark cities. And if you look back to our data, we are a lean, mean firefighting machine. We're not fat by any means. Most departments are over the index of 1 for 1,000. So when our people say they're working hard, they're busy, that data point reflects that.
You and I talked about this morning, but Rockford being high, the highest on that benchmark list. And you said that's partly because they run an ambulance.
Right.
Do you know what their ratio would be without the ambulance personnel?
I don't.
Just curious.
I know a guy.
Yeah, I know a guy too. I met him.
I know a guy that can tell you.
Sure, yeah.
But that
Just
is
curious.
reflected when they have an ambulance service that
Yeah.
bumps that up because those are dual role cross-trained firefighters. And then the next one, and we just finished a hiring list last week. We have several women on the list. That 7.61%. The national average is now below 3%, but I would like to see that number get higher in our recruiting and hiring more women. It's at PFA, it's been as high as 12, 13% before. So there's work to be done, not just locally, but nationally to attract more women and more minorities into the fire service. I think that's just something.
One of your reports, I think, said you're shooting for 10%.
That would be our first benchmark, yes. And we have several women, I can't tell you exactly, but a list of 35. But we have, I talked with Ryan Thomas yesterday, who headed up that interview process, and we have a very diverse mix on there, it appears. So from talking to them, and they were the ones experiencing the care.
Good.
This is the slide I was talking about earlier. Through that 40 years, we're staying at that 80-20 split. If we look at the call ratio, it's pushed to about an 85-15. But if you look at the assessed value ratio and the contribution ratio, we're still staying at that 80-20. And I think as we're tracking along, as we look at Mulberry annexations, it's going to stay right at that 80-20 because of the rapid growth of Timoth. And Timoth is over 7,000 people now. And Mike and I were just talking about the traffic jams out there every morning. I swear that I drive to work, and when I drive home, they've built a house since I've been gone. The development behind Station 8 that Landon Hoover, his company, is overseeing, and the development around Wild Wing, and then Saratoga Falls, which is by the schools. The schools are driving on that road, which is really driving us into the next iteration of what our next station will be, is probably North Timoth. And just an aside for our city partners, the district board yesterday completed their work to get impact fees in the town of Timoth through mayoral changes and town manager changes. We have that completed now. So July 1st, we will be collecting impact fees on that growth there to help pay for that station that needs to be at North Timoth. But the thing is that split stayed really probably, I don't know if margin of error is the right term, but it stayed pretty close to what I would call margin of error at around that 80-20 split. So,
Sorry to interrupt you. Are you saying the Timoth Town Board adopted capital expansion fees, impact fees last night?
no,
Tonight is
2 weeks ago tonight.
Second reading. And so could you just order of magnitude per residential unit cost? What is it?
It's Ann should probably address that better.
I don't have
So-
the
Square
schedule
footage
with
based
me,
on-
but it's exactly the same as the cities. It's the same study, the same consultant.
Okay,
So they're the same fees.
okay, great.
2,000 square foot, just a little bit north of $700.
Okay, and then remind me, Larimer County unincorporated GMA, growth management area. Do we have impact fee legislation adopted and being collected?
We're not collected yet. but-
No, we still have to do the county, the non-Timnath part of the district. I did ask them a question this morning that one of you all asked about within the GMA of Timnath, whether they're doing fees. I have not heard an answer back on that yet.
Well, that would be probably Weldon, Lammer, right? I mean, part of Timoth is in Weld County, is that right?
A little bit.
Yeah, so I think it'd be really great if we could get like in one spot, what, particularly for a PFA district, we know the city's collecting, now Timoth is collecting. It'd be great to see if the entire district is
That's right.
collecting for, and if not, what, how can we help advocate to the Lammer County Commissioners?
I know one of them real well. Just come and hang out in here.
The
Get that done.
the IGA and the implementing legislation that we went to Timnath with is the model from Larimer County. So it should match exactly what Larimer County used with City of Loveland and Estes. So it shouldn't be a legal review issue to get it done. It's just getting in front of their attention.
That's awesome.
And that's on our agenda, correct? I mean, that's for us to initiate.
All right, next slide. So looking forward, May 24th. So the first order of business of the district board meeting on May 24th at 8:30 will be the swearing in of Chief Bergson as the chief of the district. And then as for this board, that will be the first order of business on May 25th. The two major capital projects we have is Station 6 should be coming out of the ground in June. And we have moved our shops to Station 8 in Timoth to accommodate that, since that's a shop expansion. And they're fitting in there, making that work. And then Station 7 starting the entitlement process and the design process. We know it's going to be a two-story station. We're going to have two fire poles. That's what it sounds like now, in two different parts of the station. We have to do two-story because still, even with the purchase, that little house out back, we're still in pretty tight space. So my input on that becomes less and less and less each day. But I talked to Captain Hedinger, said, just take the architects or take a picture of the firehouse on Walnut. If there's anything that we can capture, some of that design that's within our means, some of the corbels and stuff, that would be nice. I know a guy that sold that once. Sold that fire.
Still got the pole, don't we?
We still have the pole. It's Station 1. One of the poles, there's one of the other poles is, because it had two poles in it.
We did.
Yeah, one of those is existing in the museum's archives.
We have to scrape 7.
We will scrape 7 and rebuild. Yeah.
And then-
So gonna have to plan what we do temporarily.
Yeah, okay.
And
We
that's
still
gonna
have
be
our
where-
houses that we had at 8, Station 8.
Well,
We bought those temporary.
we've discussed that. We've discussed school buildings.
No.
We've discussed the training center. That's going to be
Stop.
when Chief Bergson gets a permanent ops chief. That will be something that they need to determine how they're going to set that. And
And
working
6
with-
going to the west.
What's that?
6 going to the west. Were we able to?
Yeah, it's
Pull
going
that
out to
off.
the west. And we were staying inside the easement. We had to do a little bit of a variance with the county, but
Okay.
and then so EMS, we're still waiting to complete the enhancement of running a paramedic engine. We have a acting battalion chief, Esteban Guzman, who is the captain in our EMS division, is working with that. His numbers of support staff are getting lower and lower. And I've talked pretty much every time I talk to Derek, we talk about EMS work and that needs to be done to get that back into staffing level that it needs to be able to do that. And Chief Bergson is an EMS chief. I mean, he's got ambulances. He's a paramedic. He understands that space. So we're leaving that for him to fill as he sees necessary.
Tom, I have a question. On your annual report, it shows that we responded to 14,878 emergency medical service incidents. Does that mean that we responded with a full fire truck crew?
There is a breakdown. Some of the RAM covered some of those, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And we only had 314 fires, is that right?
yes, and most of those were small.
Small, so we're more in the emergency medical services, aren't we?
That's exactly right.
Since Mike's asking, if I may, I was gonna ask, or maybe in future versions, I don't know if this is final or if it's and published and all that, or.
Almost final, but we did use the district comment and already made a change in what you're looking at from yesterday, so.
Well, all I was thinking, Kirsten, is when I read this, it's like, you have 14,900 events and then you go down to like 170 kind of thing. What would be interesting would be to see the breakdown of rescue and emergency medical at a little bit of a finer level. Because I mean, when you look at the chart, there's this line that's goes off the chart, and then over here, we have little tiny other. It would be of interest, I think, to see how that big category breaks down.
Okay.
Because that's exactly the question I had when Mike mentioned it as well.
Okay,
So-
I'm sure Sean Jones and his team can help me out with
Yeah.
that data point.
Yeah, would, you raised a question about RAM. Would it be useful to have a line for RAM there too?
I think the best place for RAM to be, Dave, would be in that nitty-gritty report that we do.
Okay,
That RAM is another unit like engine 1, engine 2, engine 3.
I got you.
engine 5.
Okay.
And it's something that the board needs to see and the
Yeah.
community needs to see if they want to, and staff needs to see. So as we
Maybe not.
measure the effectiveness and the efficiencies of a RAM unit, I think that comes to play in there.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious that this board with our new chief's experience in emergency medical, whether or not what involvement is this board going to get into in ambulances and emergency medical services as to where we have been in the past. So
We're pushing to get that first advanced life support engine up and running at Station 4. So
yeah, I suspect that's going to be a real challenge for this board to come to grips with, but kind of makes you sick about the cost, doesn't it?
We've been there for several years.
I've got it.
Get
Yeah,
that,
well,
Dave?
it's just, yeah,
Get that,
of course.
Dave?
Yes, I just.
Make sure you're
recognize
alert.
it. And I was gonna say the same thing. That's not a new interest. That's something that the board has expressed and the staff has actually expressed for a couple of years, concerns about some of that space. And I do think that that's something that Chief Bergson brings as the ambulance provider. He brings in Rockford, brings a lot of experience.
and understands EMS and has worked in some spaces, mobile integrated health and stuff in partnerships with, and I believe he has 3 hospitals in Rockford, but working with those hospitals and how that all plays together. So
I had a, Darren, I'm wondering I think we should actually leave it because it's a good data point, but then I'm wondering if below we could just clarify what
Perfect.
goes into that.
Yeah, perfect.
So not breaking down the bar graph necessarily, but what goes into rescuing emergency medical.
Or
service.
or maybe some segments within that bigger line.
Yeah.
I think that big line
But I
is
think
great.
like when I looked at this, I was like, oh my gosh, we really do. And so I don't want to lose that, but just what goes into that. And then also, I don't know if everyone knows what a good intent call is. And if we could.
I'm told you have to
Do an
good-
asterisk.
a good intent call is the person who calls has
Yeah.
good intent and it probably, like, I smell smoke. We get a call, somebody smells smoke in a neighborhood, we'll send someone out to go smell along with them.
Yeah,
Well, I smell it too. Where's it coming from? Or, a natural gas smell, or I think there's a fire and it's steam.
Steam out of a dryer vent.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if
Came out
we
of
just
the
put
dryer
little
vent.
asterisks for people. That would be helpful.
Let's see what we can do. They are trying to print
Yeah.
today, but if not, I have these comments for next year. for
Next year.
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last thing on their community growth and partnerships is we look at a more regional approach to providing fire emergency services in the region, as we said. And there's a lot of bumps that we still need to work out between the closest unit goes. Chief Garcia is working feverishly at that with our partners. Is when we first turned it on, there were some things that we didn't anticipate happening, like us getting a request to send a fire truck to downtown Johnstown. And then when we didn't have any trucks, they was going to send us a ladder truck from Estes Park. Like, whoa, we got to go back and make sure we turn this on appropriately. And so that's part of that. But it's kind of how the authority got started, is by sending the closest. And that also expands into the Front Range Fire Consortium, which is our training consortium, but also working on purchasing capabilities. Is there a way to buy apparatus? Is there a way to buy equipment and stuff as a regional partner, and working together in that realm? Next slide. Questions and answers.
Well, I'm gonna start it off, Tom. Great report. And I think this is just indicative of the leadership that you brought to, in the culture that you brought to PFA since you become the fire chief. And very impressive. And I can't thank you enough for the efforts that you've done as our fire chief.
Thank you.
And I'll certainly miss you at these meetings. So you've done a great job, Tom. I remember when we first started here, reports wouldn't look anything like this.
Well, that's the professionalism that we have out.
It happened under your watch.
And fantastic people. Let
Did a
them
good
do
job.
their thing, and they do great work.
In fairness,
It's called leadership.
half of his staff is former city
Well,
employees. Let's. I know.
People to make you look good. No, I'm just kidding here. Tom, I certainly would just echo Mike's, commendation to your leadership. Just kind of, I think the report, reflects that. You've done a great job for my limited exposure in light of everybody else around this table, almost in terms of just understanding the importance of organizational culture and excellence, and so you have established a great place for Chief Bergstrom to come in and build on your legacy for sure. So thank you for that. Thank you for a great report.
Thank you. And then the other thing I'll close out on the annual report is there is that statistical piece that's in there that breaks it down, which used to be the only annual report we did. But we still have the comparison departments that are tied back to our goals and objectives, our accreditation points. And that ties back into our budget, into our strategic plan. That all gets tied together in there. So that's for some light reading during the rain this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Great report. Next item is entertain any questions that the board members have on the briefing papers. Is there anything you'd like to highlight, Tom?
The one thing I will highlight is the report on the, we've got the audit coming up that Kirsten has. So the audit's coming up, which is again, and also once again, we received the award for our CAFR from the Government Finance Officers Association. Again, staff, I just can't, that doesn't come out of my office. That comes out of Kirsten's office, the work she does to put our budget together, the presentation for the budget.
Yeah.
We consistently win the GFOA Budget Presentation Award and the CAFR Award. We partnered with we started work with the city and kind of followed their lead on that several years ago. And now we continue to do that. So it makes audits much easier, makes it easier to present to you in that audit. And it is to coin a phrase from someone else, if not the GOFOA, then who? But it's third-party analysis of what we're doing to make sure that we're following the transparency of our budgeting process, and that we're responsible for what will be in $40 million of someone else's money. That's a great responsibility, and Kirsten takes that very, very seriously. So, and not to be left out in the end. And what she's brought in as a CFO of this organization has been that accountability. So that's all reflected in that. So I would highlight that. And then the other thing I would highlight is the white fleet revamping of staff vehicles. And the reason I asked that to be put in is this gives it a public face. As demonstrated in there, over the years, this will save us considerable money, the money that we can put back into apparatus and other parts of the department, especially in fleet services. Brad Smith is doing a bang-up job in managing our fleet services. But I wanted to do this because all of a sudden there's going to be new vehicles running around that have PFA on the side of them. So it's not that we went and spent extra money. We built this lease agreement, and Brad works closely with Tracy Oshner. I think that's right. To build this. And so that gives the board an awareness and the community awareness that the white fleet or the staff cars. That the term white fleet comes from the military, the heavy stock, the tanks and personnel carriers and aircraft and boats. That's the green fleet, and the white fleet are all the vehicles that staff and serve those. So we still have a lot of fire prevention folks. We have our battalion chiefs that their vehicles are ready to respond. They are take-home vehicles, but for those cases where we need extra overhead staff on fires or other incidents, we can call it back in. So I just wanted to give you the heads up on that process. Hey, why are all these new cars running around? But I know that has a sensitive community. That has a sensitive community aspect to it, and internally as well. We communicated this to our employees as well.
I don't have it in front of me, but on page 144, you show that loss per $1,000, and then you show a 5-year average on there. It doesn't appear as though the 5-year average is correct. Anyway, would you look at that?
144.
141, I'm sorry.
It's in the big document. And Dave, we did take out most of the loss benchmarks because everybody looks at loss differently. Some get a number that's from the inspector or the investigator, some get an insurance number. And so it's really not comparing apples to apples.
Okay.
So
we ought not to put them on the same chart if they're not.
It is.
It was kind of confusing on what the heck.
There's
For the last 10 years.
Sorry. There's PFA loss and it's compared to the 5-year average. So I'll take a look at this chart, and if I need to update it, I will.
Okay.
Just make sure that it's correct.
I mean, the 5-year average is so much lower than all of the other bars. Just weird. Anyway, check it out.
That. And here's the other thing. We had this discussion when Jerry was on the board about fire loss and fire loss. I remember one meeting we got into a long discussion about that. And this is the whole staff over in fire prevention could talk about it, because like right now, lumber is a 2x4 is $15. One 8-foot tube. A year ago, it was $2.50.
Wow.
So the cost of, how to measure that loss and how to take in, what our investigators try to do is go, okay, what's it cost a square foot to rebuild this? There's so many different formulas. It's really, sometimes it's apples and sandstone comparison. So fire loss is really hard to evaluate.
Another curiosity question. Somewhere in here you talked about a juvenile fire setter program. I don't remember ever hearing about that one. Is that arson?
Youth fire awareness, we've had it I know we've had it at least for 33 years.
Yeah, I just don't remember hearing about it.
I know for 33 years. And it's what we do.
I think we needed to teach them how to set fire.
Yeah, I was thinking arson anonymous.
There's several iterations of that, but when we have someone's identified in the community that may be associated with a fire that we responded to, or maybe parents that call in and say, or through restorative justice, that we put them into a program that we have firefighters, we have personnel and community risk reduction that work with them to train them about the hazards of fire.
Okay.
And some of those, sometimes we even work with a counselor, with a psychotherapist in town, that we can refer to them if it's a more advanced case.
Okay. So it is Arson Anonymous. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Had anybody else heard about that before? Remember hearing about that?
I haven't heard about a lot of things.
And you're walking out on us.
I just have one question with respect to your new building and tenant finished plan reviews. You're saying that you're averaging 19 days to review plans. That's the average. Is that seems like a long time?
Actually, in today's environment, I would contend it's pretty quick, with a 2-week target, I believe.
And Chief Howell is there.
Chief Howell, are you there?
Yes, sir. And those numbers are correct. And I think the best explanation I can give is in this current environment, in order to process those permits well and engage developers for the time that it takes to make sure we have the right information, provide the plan review, the processing, the fee, the issue of the permits. It is taking on an average 19 days.
Well, when you're building a house, and that just seems like a long time to be tied up in reviews, but I guess that's what it takes. Just seems like it's a long time to do a plan review.
And I'll say this for the staff over there, they work many, many hours to keep those things turning just because of the number.
I just know that's a sensitive issue in the development world.
It is a staffing issue, and it's kind of a balance of try to
We have hired contractors in the past to supplement, right?
And Jerry can, when that need arises.
Yes, sir. We do have a budget that allows us to do that. And certainly for more complex projects, we have the opportunity to engage outside help. And the one thing I would share is that those numbers are averages. And so some jobs can certainly be turned over faster than others. So for example, a small business or single family project, on average, we will turn over faster than a 3-4 story building with a lot of other development nuances to it.
Hey, Jerry, a suggestion you might put in your quarterly report. You have, I think the time's there, but not the goals. You might do that as compare how you've done it to the goals.
Okay.
Tenant finish 20 days and new building 30 days, I think are your goals. But you might consider putting that in the quarterly report as well.
Dave, thank you. I hear that, and we will do that.
Thanks.
The only other thing I have, it's been a pleasure.
We have cake for Ken.
What's that?
We have cake for Ken to celebrate.
The Ken got up, but we have a cake for Ken. So please enjoy a piece of cake. And we have a cake for you. I didn't give that to you. I gave your plaque, but we have a cake. It's part of our tradition. And you're able to get yours. We had to deliver Kristen's to her house because of the COVID stuff.
Well, that's a great.
We have the cake, and I just want to say, under other business, it's been a pleasure serving this board for the last 10 years. As I told the district yesterday, I got involved at the board level in 2000 when Chief Mulligan appointed me as the strategic plan coordinator and worked through the strategic plan. And I don't know, not too many board meetings since 2000 have I missed. I'm going to figure out what to do on the 4th Tuesday morning of my month. Believe me, I'll figure it out.
I'm sure you will.
But it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure serving the citizens through you all. And I feel, as I said, this is a fantastic model, and the collaboration that we have that's built by this is why we can provide those outcomes at 0.6 firefighters, is because of that collaboration and the staff that we have and the firefighters that we have that are dedicated to making this a better place, making this community whole. So it's been a joy. So thank you.
It's been our pleasure, Tom.
We will,
Thank you.
I will be here on the 25th to see Derek sworn in and give him a pat on the shoulder and head to the airport.
So there will be times for us to talk between now and then. For
Yeah,
sure.
and I would hope so. One of the things that on the June 11th ceremony, Mike and I talked as chair at the master of ceremonies, but if we go back to 10 years ago when we did that, we had, when Lisa was the chair, she spoke, but Mike got up and spoke as a representative of the district board. So we would need someone from council, the city's partnership to speak at that as well. And that'll be more of a change of command. One chief leaving and another one, there'll be a handshake and an exchange between the two. That was what and I thank you for allowing me to get to that point. The hiring of a new chief.
So I guess, so this is your last formal meeting as the chief, board meeting as the chief. We're going to see you in public settings again, obviously our one-on-ones, but I'll say too, I've been a long-term board member on this board for the last 16 years and you've been amazing, Tom. And I mean, just I'll speak from a board standpoint. You've always had exhibited a can-do. Hey, if it's broken, let's fix it together. You've not been defensive. It's never been an us versus them, whether it's at the city's executive team, my role as city manager, but also as a board member. I think that, there's been a lot of accolades about you and your team today, and I support all those. I'm full agreement. And being the executive leader, you've just modeled what that should look like in collaboration and partnership. And you've had tricky board members, you've had tricky boards, but I just think that you've,
We're in this room right now.
but it's, it can get a little tricky sometimes. And I think you've just navigated that so well. I mean, and I'm grateful for that. So, we have a friendship. I'm looking forward to post-retirement friendship that'll be different than this. And then also, I've known Kathy since the time that you've been the fire chief as well. And she's been an amazing partner of yours. And I know during really tough times has been, very supportive, and that matters a lot. So I'm, really, I think she's modeled also that partnership so well for a lot of us who, these jobs are complicated, but you've done it with amazing grace. And I've never seen you get angry and want to storm out of the room. You've just always stayed in there. And I think that's one of your greatest attributes as an executive leader. So I'm thankful for that. Yeah.
Not only can do, but he did it.
Yeah, no kidding.
He said, I can do it, but then he doesn't.
Yeah, the results are there. It's
Yeah,
not just talk.
exactly.
The results
Yeah.
are there as well. And Ann and Kirsten have been attached at your hip as well. And that partnership matters a lot. And you've just been a great executive leader as well of team. And I know last year's been tough with some relationship, but man, I'll tell you what, I think you lead with a great culture. PFA has, we've got some challenges, but you're one of the most trustworthy executives I've ever worked with.
Let's have some cake, huh?
Cut the cake.
Cake, Ken.
We need to see everybody.
There's that a public meeting.